Hi, everyone. My name is Elena Martinez, and I'm one of the co-artistic directors of the Bronx Music Heritage Center. Welcome to our September program of Music by the Book, where Bobby Sanabria and I, the other artistic director, we talk to authors about recent and relatively recent books that have come out about the Bronx, about music and culture in the Bronx. And so we're excited tonight to have one of our neighbors, actually, from the Bronx, Fernando Ponce LaSpina, who's going to be talking about his book, My Memory, My Roots, which actually came out, I think, about a year ago or so, which it came out in the Spanish language version, but the English language version recently came out. So we're going to be talking to him about that, about his book. And before we start, I just want to give a shout out to our funders. The Bronx Music Heritage Center programming is supported in part by the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the New York State Legislature, public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, the Lily Auchincloss Foundation, the Laurie M. Tisch Illumination Fund, and the Howard Gilman Foundation. And tonight's, as I mentioned, tonight's program is with Ponce LaSpina, and who's the director and founder of El Maestro Cultural Center, Boxing Gym and Cultural Center, which right now is located on Southern Boulevard, just across the street. Like I said, our neighbors, the neighbors of the Bronx Music Heritage Center. And we're also excited that we're doing it today in September 22nd, which Ponce is an activist and very involved in the politics of Puerto Rico and the history and culture of Puerto Rico. And tomorrow will be the anniversary of the El Grito de Lares, which was the first time in Puerto Rico that the Puerto Rican people on the island tried to get independence from Spain in 1868. So in homage to that, we are glad to have Ponce take part in this program, Music by the Book, tonight. And what we ask everyone who's watching on Facebook, go to our Facebook page, tell your friends to watch this to our Facebook page. It's a public page. Anyone can and enter it, even if you're not on Facebook. And while you're listening, if you have any questions for Ponce, put them in the Facebook comments section, and Bobby and I will ask Ponce as well as our own questions, but you'll get to ask your own questions of Ponce as well. So to start off with, welcome, Ponce.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, Elena.
We are so glad to have you on to talk about this because, the work that you do in the Bronx is so important on a political, cultural level, for the community. And so your new book, again, My Memories, My Roots, it just came out in the English language format. And so recently reading this, I have some questions from you about some things that were in the book. And then we might go on to other questions. Bobby might have a few other questions he wants to throw in. As I said, anyone else from who wants to chime in. But I want to start off with reading your book. Now, you were born in Puerto Rico. If you could tell us a little bit about your life in Puerto Rico. And also, you don't just come from a large family. You come from a tremendously huge family. So
Yes.
It's pretty amazing. Can you just tell us a little bit about your roots in Puerto Rico, where you're from, and your life back in Puerto Rico when you were young?
Well, basically, I'm from a barrio, right? A place called Tibes in Ponce, Puerto Rico. Tibes is where they have the Taino museum called Tibes. It's basically a place that is no longer there. They have a reservoir there now. So about 300 families have to move out. But before that, I was born there in March 21st, 1955, which is basically a date, the March 21st, that takes us back to the Ponce Massacre that happened in Ponce in March 21, 1937. That's why when people ask me about my birthday, I really don't celebrate my birthday, because a day like that, it was a day that 21 Puerto Ricans were massacred in Ponce, in the streets of Ponce, about 200 wounded, hundreds of people arrested. But nevertheless, so I was born in this place called Tibes. My father and mother now deceased. We still are 18 brothers and sisters, but understanding that one of my closest brother and somebody that everybody knows, because El Maestro, one of the founder del Maestro, my brother Pedro, he just passed last year from cancer. And so In Puerto Rico, I didn't know I was going to the city, while going to a beach, or going to a swimming pool. Basically, we were born and grew up in the farm and the river. That was the way that we participated. Now, this place called Tibes is a very Taino. Besides the museum in Tibes, they found a big plaza right where I was born at in Tibes, a big plaza with a lot of things, like family, Taino families and all that. And so it's a very Taino place.
Now, also, I want to extend my condolences about your brother Pete, because we know that he had passed away this year, and he was such a part of El Maestro, part of all the events, and seeing him there, at the gym and in all the events. I'm really sorry. And but you and him both came over when you were like teenagers, right? Young teenagers. You left Tibes and you left Puerto Rico.
Right.
Oh no, so and you came over to New York City and lived in the Bronx, lived in Brooklyn for a while, which it's funny. I think when you talk about Brooklyn in a book, you're like, yeah, Brooklyn you didn't like as much because
I don't like Brooklyn.
The Bronx had more Sound of Music in it,
Of
right?
course. Yes.
But what I find really interesting is that you seem to assimilate really quickly into culture, into the New York City culture when you were here. Like, so going to the school, listening to the music, you got involved in gangs, and we'll get in touch. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Do you see yourself as Puerto Rican or New Yorican? Just because you're so part of the Bronx, like, how do you see your identity?
150% Puerto Rican. I came here when I was 15. I was 15 and Pedro was 14. Like I said, being that we are 18, I was 15, my brother was 14, my other brother was 16, 17, and like that. So we all like 1 year apart. And basically, we didn't want to come here. Peter and we was the last one to come from Puerto Rico. We spent 6 months in Puerto Rico, and we was forced to come to New York because we were on the age and we had to go to school. And we came to a place that pretty well known on those days for music, for a lot of Puerto Ricanness. I'm talking about Aldous Avenue, Aldous between Howe Avenue and Southern Boulevard, which because a block away from there, we have El Teatro Boulevard, the Boulevard Theater, where I saw at 15 the big lines to have a Gran Combo there, to have all the trovadores coming from Puerto Rico, Chuito de Bayamón, Lucecita Benítez, and all of them. They used to play there at Teatro Boulevard, the same way that they went to Teatro Puerto Rico and Commodore and Rio Piedras in Brooklyn. Basically, when they came to New York, they used to come here like for a weekend. And I used to see all those long lines. And of course, I didn't know much what it was, but then I found out, what was going on inside the theater.
Wow, so that was at Teatro Boulevard. That's you can still see that building on Southern Boulevard. It's like a Planet Fitness now.
Yeah. And the sign's still there.
And Gran Combo played there. That's incredible.
Gran Combo, and I remember 70 or 71. I got to see right there in Howe Avenue. They have a rehabilitation program there. I forgot if it was Serra or whatever. I mentioned in the book, but I just forgot the name. But I saw Willie Colon there. I saw Hector Lavoe. I saw Willie Rosario and his band. And I saw Conjunto Mayari down there. I saw a lot of groups used to come right there on that street, like Black Parties and things like that. Very, very famous bands.
So yeah, by the time you came here in the late 60s, this music was like Willie Colon and all them were just getting really popular then. So you sort of came right at the perfect time
Yes.
when this music was blowing up, what we call salsa today. And I'm going to get back to the music. I want to get back to your work, bringing music and activism into all the work that you do. We'll get back to that. But So you're now in living in New York. You've come to New York, and you also talked a little bit about, which is really interesting. I never knew this about you migrant farm work in New Jersey, which is really interesting because a lot of times when we think of migrant work, a lot of times people don't associate the Puerto Rican community with that as much. But tell people a little bit about what you did there, like how the work you did over the summers there.
Okay, but basically, my oldest two brothers have came to work in the farms in Florida, New Jersey, and in particular in New Jersey in 1966. So by 1970, when I come, they are already working there. And I went to school. Like I said, I really didn't like the school because I didn't know the language. There was a lot of bullying going on, and I was 15 years old. I was maybe like 130, 135 pounds. Didn't know the language, real skinny, small, and my brother too. So we were not really much into fighting. Of course, we didn't know the language. But anyway, so I found a job at a grocery store, but the owner was Santiago. This man, I didn't know who he was, but he was from Ponce, and that's why he gave me the job. Later on, I found out that he was one of the bodyguards of Pedro Albizu Campos. And he used to talk to me about Albizu Campos, and of course I didn't know. And it's interesting because his brother, Tobita Santiago, was a very good friend of Cheo Feliciano. And they had spent time together in jail and all that. And Cheo used to come to the store, and I used to see him, but I didn't know who he was. And a lot of musicians and a lot of politicians, revolutionaries used to come to the store, but I'm just 15 years old, just coming from Puerto Rico, so I didn't know. Little by little, I found out. From the Bronx, everything went bad in the building, broken windows, or no heat, no hot water, and all that. A lot of drug addiction that we could see up on the roof, on the stairs, and all that. And my family decided to go to Brooklyn in 1971. So from Brooklyn, I really didn't like Brooklyn either. We went to a street called Bedford Avenue, and there was basically just a few Puerto Ricans there. Also, the other people were from other nationalities. A lot of fights and all that. So during the school vacation in the summer, my brothers took me to work at Woodstown, New Jersey, which is a farm, and I worked there for 2 months. And the reason why I worked there, even that I was a minor, because my brothers, they knew the bosses and all that. And so I worked like picking up pickles, tomatoes, and cleaning the farm and all that. And I worked there for 2 months. And it was interesting because in there, I saw what was going on. There was a lot of prostitution. There was a lot of drugs. People are just there. They spending their money or wasting their money, with buying prostitution and all that. And I learned that a lot of these people, they were moving from camps. Like during the summer, they would work in New Jersey. Then after that, they would go to Florida. They go to Virginia, and they go to different cities and all that. So it was like a type of slavery, because a lot of them, they didn't have the money to go back to Puerto Rico, or they didn't have families now, and they just kept moving on with the farmer.
So before we go on, I want to introduce Bobby Sanabria, our artistic director, just came on. I want to welcome him, and he'll be asking some questions too. But Ponce, when I was reading the book, it seemed like most of the people you were referring to, the men that you knew who worked on the farms, it seemed like they were mostly Puerto Rican. Were there any other Latinos, or were they mostly just Puerto Ricans?
No. Basically, at that time, during my time, it was basically 1972, 73, around there. There was Puerto Ricans, and what happened was that they have like a deal with the government in Puerto Rico, especially this person, the big foreman. He was from Utuado, and he will go to Puerto Rico or ahead of time and get these people to come in, telling them that they will have a job, that they will have all these opportunities that they didn't have in Puerto Rico, especially during that time. Still, probably there was no sugar cane, there was no coffee, a picker and all that. So they would tell them, come to New York. I mean, come to New Jersey, work a few months, and you will make enough money, to go back or to support your family. So basically, at that time, I remember like in the farm, there was about 100 people, and most of them they were like from Utuado, Arroyo, Ponce, from places in Puerto Rico that were very poor.
So what's really interesting about that is that I think that people don't always associate that with the Puerto Rican experience. So it's interesting that you wrote about that in the book because, we kind of think of, Puerto Ricans in the Northeast, we think of the urban experience, but you have, had this other side that you were also had that experience with. So after that, you start really talking a lot about the book. There's a good portion of the book is spent on your teenage years, your life as a gang in the Savage Skulls. In the Bronx, and I want to talk a little bit about this. You were in the Savage Skulls, which were probably like one of the biggest, most feared gangs in that era, right?
Yes.
In the Bronx and all over the city. And what's really interesting is that but as you probably know, Bobby, and he can maybe talk to this as well, has been working on the West Side Story project. And when people think of West Side Story, it gets a lot of criticism because it shows only represents Puerto Ricans as gang members. So everyone's like, oh, we're always just represented as gang members. But I know, like, my father grew up in the Bronx, and he was in a gang in the 50s. I mean, that was part of the experience, young Puerto Rican men. And so it is part of the experience. It's not the only way we should be portrayed, but it is part of our life there. So, and you spend a lot of time in the book talking about this. Can you talk about, but now you're sort of like, you have a completely different life now. You're an activist. You work with the community, culture. Can you talk about how those two parts of your life, how do you reconcile being a gang member and this really like, a gang that, gangs have this really bad reputation, and now, you do all this other work. And can you talk a little bit about that? Why did you join a gang? How did you feel about being in a gang? How do you feel now about that?
Yeah. Well, it's something that I don't feel sorry for. Because it made me grow up. When I came from New Jersey, back to New York, I came to live at 555 Fox Street, Fox between Prospect and St. John's. And basically there was a lot of gangs there. And I ended up going to Monroe High School. I had a choice to go to Morris High School, but Morris High School, for me, was no good. More blacks and all that, less Latinos and all that. And I found out that Monroe had more Puerto Ricans and Latinos and all that. So I decided to go to Monroe. But still, the bullying was still going around. I'm talking 1972. And in my block, we had people from the bachelors, and we had people from the Savage Skulls. Savage Skulls, I was attracted because it happened that one of the guys that approached me, he happened to be from Ponce, and very good man. He passed. He was like a year older than me, and when he started talking to me about the gangs and all that, I saw that, like in the jacket, for example, beside the skulls, they had the Puerto Rican flag, and they said proud to be Puerto Rican. They listen to salsa, they listen to Spanish music, and that attracted me because I grew up listening to this. And as I kept talking to him, then I found out that our president at that time, that he's still out there, Felipe Blaqui Mercado, also from Ponce. And I found out that most of the people in the board or the main leaders, they were from Ponce. So of course that attracted me, And I saw that they were really like in the club. It was not just Puerto Ricans, but we have blacks, we have whites and all that. We have Dominicans and we got Hondurans and all that. So it attracted me.
And do you feel though that like There was definitely a danger. There was violence associated with the gang life. How do you look upon that now? Because you're someone who is like community minded and civic minded, and promoting culture and community engagement. How do you look back on like what the what gangs like sort of gang life represented back then?
Well, basically, I understand now because even before the 70s, I didn't know like the history from here or even my own history from Puerto Rico. So I learned to respect and start looking for information about why I was Puerto Rican, why there were all these other groups that were not Puerto Ricans. But not only that, as a gang member, then I found out that there were places that we could not go, like Little Italy, like Trucks Neck, like Pelham Bay, like places that we were not able to go because discriminations, situations with the Irish at that time, Golden Guineas, all different Italian, Irish, white gangs and all that. And a lot of times, we was chased. We was chased by them. So we learned how to chase them back or go into their turf.
So that's true. I mean, gangs were about protection, right, for different ethnic communities a lot of
Yes,
times. But
yes.
and you know what's really interesting? So yeah, I mean, you all heard this. I mean, I heard stories from the generation before you, the guys who grew up in the '50s who were part of gangs, the Turbans and all those guys, and then the later generation. So as teenagers, you couldn't go into different new communities because
Yep.
though if you went into the Little Italy, there the gangs there would beat up Puerto Ricans, the Italian gangs. But like, adults could move more freely, right? It wasn't. It was really just the teenagers that really were fighting, right?
No, not really. I saw a lot of adults, for example, like our gang, and I learned that most of the gangs, basically, our oldest brothers, our little brothers, our sisters, our cousins, our uncles, and all that, they were all part of it. And because we was defending more like our territory, our block, and try to keep it safe for us. So when there was something happening in our block, probably you see the guys with the jackets and they were identified either Savage Coast, Savage Nomads, Black Purse, Black Space, or whatever. But there were other adults, like with a baseball bat, with something defending their children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one thing, just a little aside about the Savage Skulls. I heard that you guys hung out at the 310 Club. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I had heard stories about music at the 310 Club. I never knew much about it. It's right at the corner, like across from like diagonally across from Casa Madeo, right? It was like right around there.
Right. Like on Whitechester and between Stevens and Prospect. I attended there, but I attended more when there were rumbles because I was never like a good dancer. I didn't know much about dance. I still don't. I could listen to the bomba playing and such and all that, but I'm a bad dancer. But basically, this is where all the gangs used to come and they did parties and all that. But there was not a lot, but there was some crazy killings that happened there and some crazy rumbles that took place out of the club.
Actually, in the club, like stuff. There would be fights in the club.
In the club or outside, more fights outside than inside.
And what kind of music was playing at that time? Like if you were
I would
if you were
say
hanging
that they
out
were
there.
playing all kind of music, including salsa. But during that time, also remember we have like the Motown, coming up very strong and all that. Because we used to listen a lot to the Motown when they came out.
And what about like another gang, of course, the Ghetto Brothers, Benji Melendez, they played music too. Did you guys ever did they perform for other gangs? Like did you ever see them in performance or
I know that they used to perform more like in black parties, street festivals and all that. During that time, inside, as I remember, it's more like DJs doing these things. And but the gangs it was kind of crazy because, for example, we were Savage Nomads were a club brothers called Blackie and Black Benji. They grew up together. They went to schools and they were kids, and they made a close and they were club brothers. But now you could have a division, right? Because we operate by divisions. That a division on my block it was okay, but then I was fighting, for example, the Savage Nomads, let's say from Whole Avenue and things like that. Because in an area, for example, we have like the Dirty Dozen. Dirty Dozens, they were our club brother too, and the founders, they were ex-members from the Savage Coast, but they were at war with the Savage nomads. Okay, so it was like kind of crazy thing. The same thing with other gangs. They had that situation, and that's why basically at one time when Black Benji from the Ghetto Brothers get killed, they did a peace treaty, and a lot of gangs came together to that peace treaty at Whole Avenue, but it really didn't last that much because of this thing that I was saying, that that the fight was still going on.
Ponce, I just wanted to interject. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Un placer y un honor un privilegio
Gracias, hermano.
tenerte aquí. Te quería preguntar, I wanted to ask you,
Yes.
at the time that, the average age of a gang member at that time, was it basically teenagers? And because I grew up in the Melrose Project, so that was kind of like Black Spades country.
Yes.
Around there. So the average age of the gang when you were in the gang, what was it? Was it basically teenagers with a few older people that maybe had come back from Vietnam and served in the war?
Yeah, well, basically Vietnam people, they were more like in the Turbans gang that was at Minford and Cortona. They were Vietnam veterans and all that, and they didn't play around. They came back, the mentality was different than ours. Basically, when I came in, I joined what it was called the Savage Coast because I was already 15, 16. My brother was 14, so he was still a young skull. So 14, 15, they were either young skull, Savage Coast, and we have the baby skulls. Baby skulls were kids, boys and girls, 7 and up, like 7 to 10, or 12, something like that. And then we have other people that they were basically like in the 20s. Majority of the people were either teenagers or in the 20s.
Now you were saying about how everybody was into Motown, which was same experience for me at the time growing up. Everybody was into Motown. Everybody was into salsa. But would you say the people that were in the gang life at that time, were they more, besides being into Motown and some in salsa, were they also into rock music, just like Benji Melendez was into rock music?
Yes, they were. For example, I remember that we listened even to country. For example, in our club, we were crazy with Johnny Denver. Mountain High and all that, Johnny Cash, and at that time the Beatles, people were into all that. But I remember that us, majority of us Puerto Ricans, I remember people listening to Chaparro, El Gran Combo, Ray Barreto. I remember during I think it was 72 or 73, I had the opportunity to see Joe Valle with Cesar Concession playing right there in Sunland Boulevard and St. John's.
Wow.
Live. And I said, wow, and then after that, I became a big fan of Cesar Concession and his band and Joe Valle, and I still got the albums and all that. But, like, I remember we listened to a lot of salsa at that time in our club.
Right. Now, so you were aware of the Fania All-Stars and everything when they played at Yankee Stadium in 1973. Yes. And all that, So.
Yes, and of course we were crazy with Soul Macosa, Mano di Bango, when they came out. Right. Everybody was dancing and playing that. Basically, our club, it was composed of all mattresses, a couch, and an all radiola, radio, and record playing, and the 45s and all that. We were crazy with that.
Now I meant to ask you, in terms of all the gangs that existed in New York City at the time, which historically most people say that the Black Spades had the most people in it because of its 5-borough reach. But which was the gang that was the most feared and most respected out of all the gangs?
Well, it became by years. Like, for example, the Black Spades because, you know, with all due respect, the population being black, it was more than the Latinos or the Puerto Ricans at that time. At one time, I think it was in 1972, came out an article that the Savage Coast was the most feared gang, you know, and they made a lot of articles and all that. But I say that at that time, you know, before us and after us is different. But 1970, 71, 72, 73, like we was either the biggest or one of the biggest gangs out there, together with the Ghetto Brothers and the Savage Nomads.
Could you tell us a little bit about the military hierarchy of the gang? I mean,
Well, we had the president, we had the vice president, and we had the warlord. The warlord basically is the guy to say, you know, peace, rumble, fight, and all that. And we had basically in a lot of these groups, they have a group called the Gestapo Committee. The Gestapo Committee was the people that put you in order, that make sure that you follow the rules and regulations. If you're a guy that, for example, you was doing things that was out of way, out of the, you know, that you're not supposed to do, they will whip you. They will beat you up.
So each gang had a Gestapo. I mean, I heard that in other ones. I didn't realize they all had that. They all.
No, I know that we had it, and I know that the Savage Nomads had it. I really can't speak for the other groups, but I think that after that, yes, they did.
so at that time period, since heroin was so big in the
Yes.
South Bronx, because organized crimes, you know, the Genovese crime family and other crime families basically saturated the South Bronx with drugs, particularly heroin in South Brooklyn, and the Gambino family as well. Did you tolerate the Skulls or any of the other gangs? Did they tolerate any members being junkies? Or,
No.
and if somebody became a junkie, would you help them out?
Well, we were either at one time we didn't have the knowledge, you know, like the guys that were not, you know, educated, they didn't have the education. Sometimes they put them like go cold turkey, don't do this, don't do that. But before that, before the heavy drugs and all that, they were into the glue, they was into the different things, the pot and things like that. Then it really got out of the way, because we noticed that they're doing the heroin and all that. You know, a lot of robberies was taking place. People were standing against each other, against the same family and all that. In our case, and I think other cases too, what happened was that our president at that time, which is Blackie, he was in jail a lot of years, and he was in and out for whatever reasons, you know, especially, you know, getting arrested with a shotgun, shooting somebody or whatever. So all the people that try to run the club, they would not do as good as Blackie did. When Blackie was out here, he would have had us together. But when Blackie was not here, other people would go different ways, and sometimes we even had a fight by our own brothers from different, you know, from other divisions.
Was Blackie the founder of the Skulls, or there been a president before?
No, Blackie was the founder, and he was and still the supreme president. They're still out there.
Right. So do you occasionally still get together as brothers?
All the time. It just happened that they always stop by the club, you know, by the maestro, and they check that we okay. Some of the brothers, they do volunteer work there. For example, one of the founders called Sinbad, Joey Blanco, and in recent years, like for example during the Hurricane Maria, that is basically the anniversary of what happened in Puerto Rico during the Hurricane Maria. A lot of the Skulls, they were here. They were here loading, unloading the trucks and all that. And also during the Festival de Lares, they always come and they help. And last year, when the earthquakes and in Puerto Rico, in Peñuelas, Ponce, and all that we filled up one container, they were also there, bringing supplies, helping us, and all that. So they're very active in the community right now.
So these gangs, like for example, like yours, the Skulls, the Nomads, the Turbans, and others, the Reapers. You know, like they uh, exist only in the surviving members that are still alive, or do you still have actual
Active
meetings
recruiting.
together of the club of members of the club, not
Well,
just to get together for social occasions, but
yeah.
actual meetings? Hey, we should do something for the community, or let's help out with Hurricane Maria. Like,
No, they still do. Like for example, the Savage Call. They I don't know how. I don't know the numbers now, but they in New York pretty big now. They in Philadelphia. They in Connecticut. They got a big chapter in Central Florida, and now it's like for example, Florida is more motorcycle club and all that, but they still respond to Blackie in New York. And I know for example they do the get-togethers, barbecues and all that together with the Space, with the Savage Nomads, and I know some of the Ghetto Brothers are still trying also to pick up and with some of the old guys, do something in the community. And basically, I think that's good because of what's still going on out there with the different groups out there, what they call crews and cliques and things like that. You see it, with the Bloods, the Crips and all that, all the abuse that going on with the little children, cutting their faces and stuff like that. During our time, this thing did not happen.
right.
So we have a couple questions in the Facebook comment section, which I'll get to. One person wanted to know how you got out of the gang life, but obviously you're still connected to your brothers from the gangs. But one thing I wanted to talk about in the book, you also talk about you went because of like a fraud charge, I guess, with the store. You ended up you were in prison for a little bit. And what I found really interesting about the being in prison is that someone now you are so like, you were sort of like the voice of the Puerto Rican community and Puerto Rican history. It was in prison that this Dominican inmate, Mazambula, I think his name was.
Asambula.
Mazambula, really taught you a lot about history. Can you talk a little bit about that? And which is
Yes.
really interesting because he was Dominican but knew all this stuff about Puerto Rican culture, right?
Yes. Well, basically, when I got arrested, I go into Rikers Island. And during that time, besides wearing a Puerto Rican flag in the jacket, either in the front or the back, we used to wear it in the pants, in the back, in our butt, basically. And when I go in there, he called me to his side and he tells me, that flag is not, like, let's say it's not a nothing. That's not like a piece of nothing. That's means a lot. This is your country. This is the colors of your country. And I said, oh shit, I didn't know, So so he told me, but I help you. So he told me that there were people there in Rikers Island in 71, which it was one of the oldest blocks, that there were a group there called the Young Lords. Of course, I had heard about the Young Lords in the streets and whatnot, but I was not attracted to them because I saw them, me, doing some things that I didn't do. Like for example, the drugs, the heavy drinking and the smoking. I was not like that. I don't smoke, no drink, and I never smoked marijuana. So anyway, so he told me, I think that you should get involved with this. And I said, I'm not getting involved with nothing. I'll be in the street in 1 or 2 weeks. 1 or 2 weeks came, and I was still locked up. And when I go to court or come back in 2 or 3 months, so I said, oh shit, I'm gonna be here for a while. So he told me, look, because at that time, basically all the leaders from all the different gangs, like the Seven Immortals, Blackie from the Savage Call, Black Tony from the Bachelors, people from the Ghetto Brothers, and people from the Black Pearls, they're all in jail. They're all right there. And we spending time together. And he said, look, I heard that you are a good leader. Because by the time I got arrested, I was the president of the Savage Calls, 5th Division. I had the Jones Calls, 5th Division. I had the Babies Calls, 5th Division. I have a lot of members. So he said, you should be a leader for something better than the Savage Calls and the gangs. And he needs to fight for the independence of your country and your people. And I said, but I don't know. So he said, I'm going to get you some information. And the first information that he gave me before dinner time, it was an information about what happened in Ponce with the Ponce Massacre. When I read what happened in Ponce, how my people were massacred in my hometown, and I never learned this in school in Puerto Rico, I cried. I cried like a baby. I couldn't understand why this thing happened, you know? And so when I came out for dinner, I went to him and he started telling me. And he said, you got to get into this. I said, okay, let me think about it. 2 days after, something like that, I'm down. He called a meeting. There were probably about 10 Puerto Ricans there. 10 Puerto Ricans and maybe 1 or 2 Latinos from other countries, I think Colombian or something like that, Dominican. And he called for the meeting because the young laws were established basically in all Rikers Island and all the different blocks, but are not at that tier, that it was called Upper 14, gallery in the second floor. So he said I should get into this. And I said, okay, I'll learn, I'll do it. So the first thing they teach me was how understand what was the meaning of the Latin flag, the meaning of the Puerto Rican flag, some things that I never learned in Puerto Rico in school. And he started teaching about Pedro Albizu Campos and how I was in jail. And he talked to me about the ones that were still in jail, like Lolita Lebron, Rafael Cancel Miranda, Oscar Collazo, Irving Flores. And then I learned about Carlos Feliciano, and I learned about all the political prisoners at that time. And that's how I got really involved.
So that's sort of like the beginning of like, I mean, you coming into political consciousness, and then sort of like, you know, to kind of switch over then into sort of your activist life. When you get out of prison, you you know, to help support fellow inmates, you organized Caribe Village, the Latin Dialogue Project, and and this is kind of, you know, integrate a lot of music with work that you did for inmates and inmates in prison still. And can you talk a little bit about, and now, I mean, I've heard about this, and I think a lot of people know your work in El Maestro, but I don't know if as many people know about the work you did with Caribe Village. If you can talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so basically, I did a little bit of time, right? I didn't want to be a snitch, but I had to do some time. And I went to Elmira Correctional Facility. And of course, in Elmira, then again, I'm with Blackie, and again, with a lot of the leaders from the different gangs out here. And I decided to go into the different programs, like a Latin Dialogue program. That was a program to learn about history. There was a program called Faith that was to help the drug addicts and all that. I never did drugs, but I went into the program because I want to hear, you know, what my brothers, you know, have been through and what was the effects. Bobby was saying before, for example, the drugs, what was going on out here. I didn't know. So I learned these things and all that. And during the time I admired, I started writing. I started writing poetry. I started writing messages and all that. And so I had told the brothers that when I come home, that I was going to do an organization, not only to support the brothers in Elmira, but to support the inmates at other facilities. So we did. So when I came home in 1976, we organized Caribe Village. And with Caribe Village, it's interesting because we worked with people from Hostels Community College, and we went, for example, into Green Haven, we went into Sing Sing, and we went into Bedford Hills. That is, it was an institution for females. And so the other thing that we did was give an orientation to our community of what was going on in you know, with the inmates in jail and all that. And one of the things that we did right after that was to organize El Festival de Lares, or the Grito de Lares, which is something that we're still celebrating since 1976. And at the beginning, we were doing it for 7 days, you know, like a big festival with games and all that, different bands and all that. For example, one of the bands that we had in 77, I think it was, we had Johnny Samop and La Sociedad 76, with basically Freddie Concession just passed. Freddie used to go to college with me at Hostos Community College. And we had Andres Jimenez, El Jíbaro, and we have a lot of the local bands playing here at Vice Avenue and the Bomba and Plena at that time, Benny Ayala, Chema, and all these on people from those years.
So this is right after you got out of Elmira?
Yeah, correct. We're talking about from the summer of 1976 on. From 1976 on, we've been doing a Grito del Ares either in the street or at El Maestro.
So
And-
how many years did you spend in Elmira?
Basically, I spent a year in Rikers Island, right? I spent a year at Elmira, and I did 1 year probation.
So describe for me at that time. It seems like during that time period when you were there in the joint, that there were opportunities for you not only to become socially, politically conscious,
Right.
but also to be educated. Did you have any educational programs that were offered to you at that time?
Yeah, for example, in Elmira, during the time that we were at Rikers Island, we didn't have, like, for example, bilingual counselors. We even had a fight for the TV. When we wanted to see or listen to the programs, salsa programs at the radio, we had a fight all the time because the radio was controlled by, basically by blacks, right? So we had to do fights and all that, and little by little, we were able to see the Chacon, and we were able to listen to the radio station, the salsa radio station, or any program that we wanted to see. When we go up in Elmira, we have GED programs. We have programs that will teach you how to do the picture frames, how to work with the metal, like doing chairs and stuff like that. I went really into school because when I got arrested, I was supposed to graduate, so I never did. So I went and I took my GED. I was, I think, the highest or the second highest at that time. And when I came home, my mind was that I was going straight to Hostos Community College. That's also part of my memories.
Well, one of the things you mentioned that you work with a lot of musicians, and this is really great. The sort of where activism and arts and culture come and play work together. You did worked a lot with Andres El Jíbaro Jimenez, who was a proponent of traditional Puerto Rican music and an activist. Jorge Vasquez wants to know there's a story about how you met him. Can you talk about how you met him?
Well, in February 1977, I joined Hostos Community College. During that time, there was a lot of people that I didn't know, or probably didn't know at that time, that they were going to be real famous, especially musicians, like Tempo Alomar, that passed not too long ago. Like I mentioned, Freddie Concession, and other politicians that I don't want to mention no names. But during the takeover at Hostos Community College, the first takeover, which is something that I know you have down the line to ask, there was a takeover there because they wanted to close Hostos Community College. And that was in 76. And I was getting ready to go into Hostos at the beginning of 1977. I participated at that takeover, and in there I met Evelina Antonetti, and I met Ramon Jimenez. Two people, and of course a lot of people, but those two in particular, and Rosa Escobar. Those three people in particular meant a lot to me, my mentors and all that. So in 77, I joined Hostos, and then Ramon, and then they saved the college, but they were still like, we were fighting at that time. We had the building 475 Grand Concourse, but across the street, there was a big building, it was still a big building, 500 Grand Concourse. And they said that building belonged to us, and they wanted to expand, but they came out and said that they was gonna sell the building to Gimbals at that time. So we decided to take over the 500 building, and we basically operated the 500 building because it was real big. The rooms were real big compared to to 475 that some students even had to be like in the hallway with chairs and all that because we are not fit in the classrooms. And we didn't have a daycare, we didn't have a library, we didn't have none of that. But in the big building, we started operating a daycare. We had a lounge. We have a space, an art room, and a lot of people like from Joe Falcon, Teatro Cuatro, Pepe Castillo, and all these people came in there. And of course, part of those people was Andres Jimenez. And it happened that Andres came to New York the same day that the police went in and arrested me and 5 other students. So he didn't have no place to stay. And so he came to my house the following day and he spent in my house 1 year. So that's how I really know Andres.
Wow, fantastic.
And can you talk a little bit? Someone had asked Maria Vives Centron in the comment section had asked, did you take part in the Oslos takeover? And you're talking about that. Yes. So can you talk a little bit more about that? You mentioned people you had met that when you were part of that, people like Evelina Antonetti and stuff. And she's we're gonna probably talk a little bit more about her later, but she's such an important person, and I think also probably affected so many activists in the Bronx like yourself. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like working with her? Because she was like a force for that generation of New Ricans and Puerto Ricans in the Bronx at that time.
Well, during the takeover, when the police was coming in to arrest the people, Evelina was there, Ramon was the main leader, and Gerald Mayer, and Rosa Escobar and Gilberto Herena Valentin. Herena was a founder of the Puerto Rican Day Parade, the National Puerto Rican Day Parade, and Fiesta Folklórica, and a lot of other organizations. When they're doing the arrest, they knew that there were people like me that were under parole, probation, and all that. And they said, anybody that is under parole, probation, you got to go out. So they knew some of us. So basically, they took us by the arm and you got to get out because you can't get arrested. So, but I saw Rosa, Evelina, and then after that, we got involved because not only for Hostos Community College, but during that time, the 5 Puerto Rican nationals were in jail. And there was big campaigns to free them. And they're getting old and they spend a lot of years there and we're thinking that they're all gonna die in jail. So I participated in some meetings in Evelina Antonetti's place called United Bronx Parents at Prospect Avenue, about a block and a half away from Mike Amadeo. And after in that takeover, Ramon Jimenez got arrested, and about 40 more students, staff, professors, and all that. Some of them they lost their jobs and all that, and they continued with the meetings, and we continued doing the different organizations. And I learned that by that time I already knew people from the Puerto Rican Socialist Party and the youth at Hostos. And like in the first 6 months of our first semester or second semester, I became the president of this Puerto Rican youth, and I got involved with the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party, and then something came up. It was the takeover of the Statue of Liberty in 1977, and I was part of that. I was arrested, and so I'm already. From a Savage Corps, from a gang member, I'm sort of becoming a target to be a nationalist, terrorist, or whatever. And I wanted to have a job because I had a son, and basically Evelina was the person not only to give me a job, but to give jobs, for example, Bomexi Luna, a photographer from Claridad, Carlos Feliciano, and then I found out that she had gave job before to Elisan Escobar, just died recently in Puerto Rico, great painter and ex-political prisoner. So and they were very, very active, especially Evelina and Rosa. They were very, and with Ramon, they were like the Three Stooges, like the Three Musketeers in the Bronx. Everything that was happening that had to do with education, with culture, with housing, with jobs, they were there. And then I learned that before that, Evelina used to give jobs to the Savage Girls during the summer camps, and not only to the Savage Girls, but the Ghetto Brothers and the other gangs in the Bronx, that other people would not give them a chance.
She was an amazing woman. I mean, there's got to be a statue made of her and put somewhere in New York, particularly
in the Bronx.
Bronx, you know.
Yes,
I mean, we were just talking to Eddie Montalvo the other day, the great conguero for the Fania All-Stars.
I know.
He got a job with Evelina.
She helped him get a job in Con Edison, helped him get that job.
He had a career in Con Edison.
But not only that, for example, Jose Serrano came through her ranks. Jose Serrano, the congressman,
Amazing.
Hector Diaz, they all came through her ranks. Carmen Arroyo, I remember when Carmen Arroyo was not an elected official. Carmen Arroyo was one of her hanchos. You call it like that? I don't know how you call it. But you know better than me. But she was there with her. She was there with her every day, and her kids and all that. And Evelina was a tough cookie. She was a tough cookie. You know, she was kind of short, but she had a big voice, and she didn't take no for an answer.
She could have been president of the Savage Skulls. You know?
She was a warlord. Because she made a lot of peace. She really made a lot of peace in all the gangs by having all our guys, working together in the summer camp and working with the kids and all that. And that's how, Blackie was very close to Benji, and like we share turf and all that. And, they were very close. The same thing with the Nomads. And yes, the ranks or the division were fighting, but a lot of respect to the presidents and all that,
Who was the person that conceived the peace treaty meeting?
That was Benji. Benji with the Ghetto Brothers when Black Benji got killed.
Right.
Now, by the way, Black Benji got killed because he was trying to make peace between gangs at Sterling and 165th and Rogers Place, which is something that right now we're working. We've been working for a while. That street, hopefully it'll be soon named after him, because he meant a lot to a lot of the youth at that time, and I think that he deserves it.
So, well, you mentioned we were talking about Evelina, and Evelina Antonetti had a lot to do with and Evelina Lopez had a lot to do with the Fort Apache protests when they were filming that movie in the Bronx. And you talk about in the book that the Savage Skulls helped with those protests. How were they involved, like in the protest?
Well, a lot of these protests, we figured that we wouldn't have a confrontation with the police or confrontation with other people that supported the movies and all that. And Evelina was a commander. So she would call on some of her soldiers, and some of her soldiers were in the Savage Cause or the Ghetto Brothers or other clubs out here that she knew that we would not back down.
Right.
So, and one of the things.
I went real quick. I just wanted to ask Jerry Gonzalez, the great New York Rican conguero, band leader,
Jerry and Andy,
played trumpet. He played at many of these protests. Did you get to meet him at that time and talk to him? And
Yes, well, Jerry and Andy, but especially Andy, I have more communication with Andy. And I remember that they participated with Conjunto Libre, right? At I think I was at Hunter College. When we came out from the Statue of Liberty takeover, we were supposed to pay, I think it was about $3,000. And Conjunto Libre was one of the groups that performed for free at Hunter College for the fundraiser. And then after that, I remember that Conjunto Libre was like around in many events, and especially with Fernando Palombo. Fernando Palombo basically participated either with a guitar or groups at different events at Hostos Community College. I mean, he's still around performing, and he was the composer on one of biggest numbers from Conjunto Libre.
Oh, Imagen Latino.
Imagen Latina, correct.
What about I just wanted to talk to you for a minute about the takeover of the Statue of Liberty, that iconic picture of the Puerto Rican flag stretched across the crown of the Statue of Liberty. Whose idea was that? And you being part of that, that's just an incredible feather in your cap that you were part of that takeover of the Statue of Liberty. Whose idea was it, and how did you actually pull it off?
Well, basically, I was just a soldier. I wasn't, the leader and all that, but I was a leader at the Hostos Community College. Like I said, I was the president of the Federation of the Socialist Students, and I became also the president of the student government at Hostos. So I have my groups and all that, and a few other people. At that time, they were part of what they called the New York City Committee to Free the Puerto Rican Nationalists, and I was part of that group. And so at one time, somebody came to recruit me. Said there's going to be a big action for Puerto Rico and for the political prisoners. We picking people and we pick you. You go, you don't go. I said, yes, I go. I didn't know where the hell I was going. I know that we met at front of Hostos Community College. Next thing, we are in that boat that goes to the statue. And in there, I knew some of the people there. There was about, altogether, there was about 30 of us. And then I knew some of them, but everybody's sitting different. When the boat came to land, everybody came out running, and then I see the chains, the locks, and all that stuff. And I was in one of the persons to stay in the first floor. Committee, I think it was 4 or 5 people that were summoned to go up to the statue and put the flag there. We was arrested. Now it happened that, and you could see more in the book. There was 2 infiltrators there. There was 2 undercovers there. In the book, I give the names and the pictures are there and all that. And then when we came out from there, we spent the night at the federal house, and then following day we came home. Then I think we went back to court, and that's when they gave us like $100 summons to each one.
But who was the mastermind behind it? Who was
one of the guys was Richard Perez, and the other one was Mickey Melendez.
From the Young Lords.
There was basically the main 2 ex-Young Lords. At that time, the Young Lords were, they have been finished. And the spokesperson at that time was Vicente Panama Alba.
Right.
That they were members at that time of the committee, of the New York Committee to Free the 5 Puerto Rican nationalists.
Now, when you were doing this in the Crown, right? Were there people there that were like just tourists watching and say, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" Did anybody say anything?
No. Well, basically, when we got there, we got everybody out. They're watching from outside. We lock all the gates, all the doors, and all that, chains, locks, and all that. And we were there for about 9 hours until the squad, how do you call it, the SWAT team, and the FBI and all these groups came to take us out.
If anybody hasn't seen that iconic photo, you can find it on the internet. It's just an amazing photo of just I would say the culmination of the New York Puerto Rican experience. That it's just an incredible piece of social commentary. That flag around the head, the crown of the Statue of Liberty.
Yes.
With Ponce and Mickey Melendez and all those guys, they're in the windows of the crown. You can see them holding the flag. Just an amazing moment in New York and Puerto Rican history.
So I just want to tell everyone to, please put any questions for Ponce in the Facebook comment section. We'll start asking him some questions from everyone. So please ask away. He's right here. We'll get a chance to ask him live some questions. Ponce, I wanted to switch over to a different topic, and also it's not really so much from your book, but when we were talking about this interview, You had mentioned someone who I hadn't heard about in a long time, Johnny Castro, who went by the name of Nano Bauta. And it was really nice to hear his name because I was able to interview him like 20 years ago. He's passed away since then. He was a gentleman who used to be an MC and comedian at the Teatro Puerto Rico on 138th Street and Brook Avenue. And he was just an amazing person. He was just involved in all sorts of the theater world, and as a comedian, as a MC, and he wrote under the name Nano Balta. How did you know him? Can you talk a little bit about him? He lived in the Bronx, and and like I said, was part of that scene and the theater, the Latin, Puerto Rican Latino vaudeville music scene, and theater scene in that era in the 40s and 50s. Can you talk a little bit about him?
Yeah, basically, like in '77, after the Statue of Liberty, I went to a lot of places to speak about my experience in jail and my experience in the Statue of Liberty. And as president of the Socialist Students, I went to speak at San Anne's Church. San Anne's Church, San Anne's 138, no, 139, 140, around there. Very important because at that time, the Father Morales and other priests and all that, they were people of the community, people that really fought for the community. And then after that, we have Pregones in there, Rosalba Rolón, that she was also my professor at Lehman College. And the nationalists used to do events there. So I met a lot of survivors from the Ponce Massacre there. I saw a lot of the ex-presidents of the Nationalist Party there, including Carlos Feliciano, that became my family and my president in the Nationalist Party. And in there, I met Johnny Castro, Nano Bauta. He was Cabo Rojeño, and he participated a lot with the Cabo Rojeños Ausentes that had a club right there on 149th Street, and right there in the corner, 149th Street and 3rd Avenue. I forgot the street, but that they have in the first floor the Navy, Army, and the second floor they have Cabo Rojeño Ausentes. And they were in charge for many years to take care of the statue or the monument that they have for Ramon Emeterio Betances at Betances' houses in 146 and St. Anne's. And he, besides being a comedian, he was a good musician. And especially he played a great accordion. And he played with everybody, and he played between folkloric music, Mexican music, merengue. He plays everything. And so I knew him very well. It happened that one of the events that I remember the most, that I treasure a lot, I don't remember the year now. I know I have it written somewhere because I'm planning to keep writing some things. But we went to support the inmates at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. And in that group that went there, Johnny was there, Chema Soto,
wow,
Benny Ayala, a guy that we call, everybody knew in the Bronx, called Ladio Casio, El Charro de Bayamón, that used to sing Bendita Bandera, forget it, like one of the best. And my brother Pete and Bomexi, which is a brother that right now is a little sick. He's about 80-something years old, and he was a photographer from Claridad. Basically, Benny Ayala passed, Johnny passed, Chema passed, and my brother passed. But we played there, or they played there, and it was nice for free. And it was amazing for the inmates. They played everything, but Johnny had his stuff. And basically, we in Sing Sing. This is all, male inmates. And then when he's gonna stop playing, he tell the guys, get your partner and start dancing. And everybody started laughing because these are just some men. These are guys that are doing. I had a good friend there that he was already there for about 25 years, and guys that are there over 30 years and at the time. And he's telling these guys to dance with one another,
Back at the time.
Yeah. What are you doing? But he was a great man. I know he has a book. I have it somewhere. but he was also a good poet.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, what happened? Did any of them start dancing? Did any of the
I
inmates
don't know.
start
Maybe they did. Maybe in the corner, but yeah, it was. I mean, everybody's laughing. What the hell this old man saying?
So, Ponce, one thing that the book I don't think went into a lot of detail, and one thing I have to say is that before I ask this question, so you have the two versions. You came out with the Spanish version first, and now
Yes.
the English one just came out a few months ago. But you were telling me that I've read the English version. You said the Spanish version has like a little bit more. There's some information in there that you can't get that wasn't translated into the English version. Is there anything? Are we missing any big stories in the translated ones?
No, basically what I did with the English version, I really don't write English. It's hard for me to write in English. It's part of my issue being from Ponce, and my issue from being nationalist and all that. And I always liked to keep my culture. So I did the Spanish book, but a lot of the guys like from the Savage Coast, people that grew up with me that don't read Spanish, said, you got to do one in English. Some of the old members from the Savage Coast said, we want it in English because we want to pass it on to our young ones. So that's what I did. So the English version have more pictures of brothers and sisters that passed, especially for the Savage Coast. He have, apart from my brother that passed from Carlos Feliciano. He has Rafael Cancel Miranda that passed last year too. And also a very good man in this community, Reverendo Danilo La Chapelle. That it was a great reverend and did a lot of social work in this community. So basically, what I put that, and I took away some chapter. Like for example, in the first book, he has a long chapter about the freedom for Oscar Lopez Rivera, being that he's free, people know he's out there. And there's a lot of literature on that, so I took that away, and I took other stuff away. I just added more, but it just happened that I just did in a couple of months ago. I did a new edition from the first Spanish edition. There's a second edition going on in Amazon.
Fantastic.
Great.
So how did you? Oh, I'm sorry, Elena. Go ahead.
No, Bobby, I have one more question
Okay.
after you go.
So we see a lot of one of the things I wanted to follow up that Elena asked, and the last question in terms of in relation to the history of your connections to the street gangs of your time period. What did you feel when you first saw? Because Steven Spielberg is coming out with a new version of West Side Story, December 10th. What did you feel about the original version, movie version? Did you say to yourself, did you laugh, or did you say to yourself,
West Side Story.
It's a lot worse than what they showing? Your honest opinion of how
basically,
and what your fellow gang members felt.
Mm-hmm.
What I enjoyed really the most there, it was more like the music.
Right.
Like the music, I think was great, but the fighting and things like that, it don't make no sense to me, right? At that time. And now the thing is that when I'm at Rikers Island and I go up on Myra, then I see people that I read their names and they doing 25 to life and they're doing a lot of years and all that. And then when I come home, I spend time with some of them, like with Salvador Ladron. The caveman. He used to come to my house. We spent a lot of time together. And they picture him to something that he really was not. And I know that I think was what was Ruben Blaze, and I don't know who
the Broadway
did
show,
the thing and all that, and it didn't go that well and all that. I didn't see it, but Salvador Agron's story is amazing. It's amazing. I know that they have books and they have videos and stuff like that. But I also met like Martin Sostre, a brother from Buffalo that got arrested. He had a library where he used to sell music, books and all that, and he was framed, and he spent about 20 something years in jail. And even though that it was not gun related, but the system made it seem like they were in gangs and they was in all different groups and all that. I saw the Switch and the Blade with the pastor from Brooklyn, from the Mau
Oh,
Mau.
the Crossing the Switchblade.
Yeah, and
that movie. Yeah.
to me, I got the books and all that. It's a lot of things that, to me, excuse the language, it's a lot of BS. It's a lot of BS. The pictures, like, really, really is not. And they put, like, for example, the religion Santeria, and they do all these things and all that. Like the mother was a witch and stuff like that. And right now, I know that they did a book of saying that that a lot of the stuff that Nikki put in that book, it was a lie. People that were from his side. And I remember when he used to speak in the churches, like the tabernacles, right? That they say. I remember that the Sabbath course and all the gangs used to see him. And at the end, he was not that tough guy that we thought that he was.
This is the person you're talking about from the subject of the Crossing the Switchblade.
Correct.
Okay. Now, when would you say was the last year that the gangs from your time period finally basically died off in terms of influence on the street? Would you say it was when the crack epidemic started, or
that was one of the big things? But before even all that, the police had a squad, right? That were infiltrating basically everybody. Similar to what they did to the Young Lords, the Nationalist Party, and all that. A lot of them basically, let's say they take one of our kids and they take our colors and they fly to another turf, and they're not supposed, so they put us one another. A lot of them used to sell us the guns and all that, and then after they sell us the guns, they arrested us and all that. Right. So they clean house. Like all the main leaders from all the different gangs, they were arresting and all that. Like I said before, the people coming up, they didn't have that power that the main leaders had at that time. So it went out of control with the guns. It went out of control with the drugs and all that. But I'd say that by the end of the 70s, basically, we not wiped out, but a lot of the gangs, little by little, disappeared, because basically all the main leaders, they either dead or they are in jail doing a lot of time.
Right. Mm-hmm. And what would you say is the legacy of all of these gangs from your time period? Well, if there is a legacy.
Yeah, for me, I could speak for me. I could speak for my club on the Sabbath calls. The Sabbath calls are still out there. A lot of them became something similar to what I am. We have 3 or 4 brothers that are pastors in New York and in Florida. We have counselors, we have teachers, we have superintendents, we have electricians, deacons. We have a lot of people that are into different movements still out there and still preaching, a better community, a better understanding with not only with our brothers and sisters, with other brothers and sisters that are not like us Puerto Ricans.
Right. Now we see you have a lot of trophies back there, and you have the famous boxing gym, El Maestro, that you run. How did you get involved in boxing and running the gym?
Well, they said that I was pretty good in boxing. It happened that a week before I got arrested, I joined the PAL boxing gym at Fox Street and 156. The famous PAL that after a while they used to bring bands in there, Latin music. I remember seeing Alberto what's his group? Típica 73.
Alberto Santiago, yeah.
Jose Alberto also at that time. So I got arrested the same week that I signed up for boxing. So when I'm in Rikers, yes, I'm fighting, rumble here, rumble there. When I go to Elmira, I said, I don't want to fight. I really want to do something to change or to work in my community. And my mind was always to have a boxing program and have a cultural program. During that time, I already read about Chewy Torres. I read about Carlos Ortiz and all these boxers. So when I came home, I started going to boxing programs, to boxing shows, and I met all of them. And I became very close to Carlos Ortiz, like that he still lives here in the Bronx by the Sandview area. I met Chewy Torres. We had a great friendship. And not only that, but doing that, I organized first the Roberto Clemente Softball League in 1983. But before that, I did my own team called Patriota Softball Team that right now we're celebrating our 40th year. With that team, we traveled 4 times to Dominican Republic. We traveled 12 times to Puerto Rico. We traveled 8 times to Florida. So a lot of these trophies are from softball, baseball, from boxing, and a lot of them tribute. Like I got a trophy there that I still hold that we were to give to Hector Lavoe before he passed. And another one is a cup that we won in the tournament, a tournament that we did dedicated to my brother Peter Conde Rodriguez, that was a neighbor. So wow. That's what some of those trophies are for.
Well, and can you mention my last question for you is because you don't go into a lot of detail about El Maestro in the book, you know, in terms of like in the narrative part about like how did you found, like when did you found it? In the first one was at like Elton, right? I remember years ago going to over like Elton Avenue, right? There was something over there before
Elton 154.
Before you came over to Southern Boulevard. So can you talk a little bit about establishing the gym too?
Yes, well. After I finished at Hostos, I was a lecturer, adjunct lecturer for Hostos Community College for 10 years, and then I went to work for New York City Housing Authority. I was a program director for after-school program, and then my last year with the senior center. During the 9/11, we had some families of our boxers that worked with us that died at the 9/11. One of them was the son of Benny Ayala, Sandy Ayala, which his body was never found. And Benny was with us all the time at the boxing program, and Matthew as a little kid, and they used to be there all the time, beating up on the congas with Monaguillo Rivera, and Pete Nieves, Mambo Kid Nieves, ex-boxer, New York City champion, and musician. And so we knew all these people that passed, and I saw how other people not being Latinos being helped financially, and they were not even talking about the Latinos. So I wanted to do a fundraiser at the gym. I had the boxers, I had the community supporting me and all that. And my bosses turned me down. They said, you can't do it. And I was not able to do that fundraiser. So basically I ended up renting Prospect Theater that at Westchester, right next to Amadeo. Mm-hmm. At that time, we're talking about during the time of the 9/11. At that time, it was called the Olympic Theater, and we did an event there, and it was bad because we had to rent the ring, we had to do a lot of stuff that it was unnecessary because we had everything at Betances. We had a location there that fixed 500 people, and I don't know, I never knew why they couldn't give us that place to do that fundraiser for our community members that had lost family at the 9/11. So when that took place, I decided that sooner or later I want to have my own place where I do what I want, and nobody can tell me, no, you cannot do this. So in 2003, I decided to have my own place, which was at Elton Avenue, or 700 Elton Avenue, in the second floor, and we named it El Maestro Cultural and Educational Center. So we've been around since 2003, and from there, so we house the boxing program, the cultural center, and one of our first groups rehearsing there, Benny Ayala was there, Jose Ortiz Bombayo, or Norca La Flaca and her group, Tato Torres and Yelva Buena. And then we started bringing La Lloroncita to perform there, Luis Gonzalez, William Gon. We started doing all these different events. And up to now, we're still around. And in those years, I lost count how many Golden Gloves and champions we have. But we have a lot of boys and girls that have become not only good in boxing, but good in the community, that they are either police officers, teachers, professional fighters, educators. So it's something that we're very proud of.
It's a very beautiful New York City, New York, Puerto Rican success story. And, that's why I said it's a privilege and honor and pleasure to have you here, because you really have represent the community to the fullest. A lot of people, mucha gente habla mucha buchi pluma,
Yes.
pero, which means translated means hablan mucha buchi pluma.
Yes.
But you really, I mean, usted es la verdad. You're the truth, and we thank you for being such a fantastic community leader. I mean, it's an amazing thing to go to a place that's a boxing gym, and then all of a sudden it converts into a stage, having great music by artists not only from today but also from the past.
Yes.
In terms of the history of Puerto Rican music, not only on the island but in New York City. So we thank you for everything that you're doing, and we'd like to remind everybody. If you have any questions? You have one more question?
Well, no more question. Well, one question. Well, something Ponce could tell everyone. Well, first of all, Ponce, when you get a chance, check the Facebook page. You have a lot of your friends and family and supporters and people who love you saying all great comments in the Facebook. So you should go back and check that. Can you tell people? Can you tell everyone? Where can they buy your book? Could they just go to El Maestro and buy it, or is there anywhere they could order it? How can they find copies of the book, either English or Spanish?
We have them both now at Amazon. They both are Amazon, and of course we have them El Maestro, and I know that some of our friends like Mike Amadeo have the Spanish edition, or Cholo Record Shop, El Barrio Music Center have them. Of course in Puerto Rico, there's a couple of places over there, and some friends in Florida. But basically, I like to be available on whatever event is possible to speak to them about the books and all that. And I really get happy when they call me that they want me to speak to the young ones, to the young people, trying to help them out not to do whatever mistakes we made. And before this continue, I would like to thank the people here, especially Elena and Bobby and Jorge. Jorge have been with us for a long time, contributing to many things and all that with different groups. And right now, especially with the Jardines that are going on, and Hostos Community College and different events, and Bobby that participated in many events. Some of them very, very special. I don't want to put him out there, but he participated in a great event with Roberto Tirado. I don't want to say for who, but with Roberto Tirado, one of the best events that we had at El Maestro. Maybe Bobby want to say who it was dedicated to.
Yeah. In any case, but I wanted to let people know and have you explain. You've called the place El Maestro. Tell the people who El Maestro is.
El Maestro is dedicated to Dr. Pedro Albizu Campos. We are very honored for the family and the community to accept this place. Hasn't been hard. We basically do the things because we have the support like people like you that always looking out for me and Maestro and the things that we do, and musicians like Jorge and many groups out there that they're amazing, that when we want to do something like we did this event, Grito de Lares on Saturday, full house, a lot of trovadores, groups, and people wanted to just volunteer. I wanted to to thank them with a few $100, and they felt insulted. You know, we don't do this. You know, we don't do this for money. We do this because we believe in what you're doing, and it keeps us going because basically, I don't want to mention names, but some elected officials, they have said to people that the reason why we never been funded and we're not gonna be funded is because the name of the place is called El Maestro. And to me, El Maestro is the most important thing.
Wow,
If you believe in what I'm doing for my community and you don't support that, then it's on you.
Wow, I didn't realize the elected officials would even think about that. Wow. But you know, Ponce mentioned Jorge. We want to thank Jorge Vasquez, who runs all the social media and our, you know, sound and everything when we're doing all these virtual events. Give a big shout out to Jorge making all this work.
Yes.
But also, I just want to again thank everyone for showing up today and listening to Ponce's great stories and you know and listening to about his book. But also, if you want to see more of Ponce, there's a group that's founded, led really by Elba Cabrera, Evelina Anthony Lopez's sister, and Nydia Edgecombe. It's called Evelina 100. You know, everyone got to hear about Dr. Evelina Antonetti today, and she's just obviously one of the most important figures in the Puerto Rican diaspora and her work she did in New York City and the Bronx. And if she were still alive, she would turn 100 years old next year. So the Evelina 100 committee has been formed to start getting together poets, artists, musicians, scholars, activists to get ready. So by next September, when it would be her 100th birthday, her centennial, we will have a whole week of celebration. So to kick off this Evelina 100 year, there will be an event next Tuesday, September 28th, at the Dr. Evelina Antonetti Park, right across the street from Ostos, on the Grand Concourse between 146 and 149th. At that park, it'll be September 28th, Tuesday at 11 o'clock a.m. And Ponce is going to be one of the speakers there. We're going to have going to open it up with a little El Tambor Llama with Bobby and Matthew Gonzalez playing drums. We're going to end it with some poetry, but in between there's going to be speakers like from the family members of Evelina, like Elba Cabrera. And also some activists, some academics, and also Ponce will be one of those speakers to talk about, you know, his Evelina's influence on the work that he's still doing in the Bronx and taking her legacy forward. So if there's not a lot of people allowed in the parks of social distancing, but we will have it, it will be live streamed. So please pay attention to our Facebook pages. There's also an Evelina100.com, some social media. So pay attention and look at our Facebook page too at the Bronx Music Heritage Center. We'll have that information up and you can get a chance to see that. And I'm here some more Ponce next week. So again, Ponce, thank you so much. This was incredible.
Thank you.
To get your story tonight. And everyone, thank you. We'll see you soon.
And remember, que viva Puerto Rico.